हाँ जी।
This is a mentoring session and exchange of knowledge among you and the speaker. We have our TAI member and also a very active participator at TAI, Deepinder Malhotra. Deepinder did his taxation, post-graduation in taxation from University of London. Very knowledgeable and always helpful. We're looking forward to have a good talk with Deepinder. Deepinder, over to you.
Thank you so much. We'll keep the talk very informal. I don't want to get into technical details of taxation because I don't know how many of you would be interested in technical details. But generally, I will just focus on two kinds of taxes: income tax and service tax. So if I could just understand the profile of everybody here, how many are entrepreneurs and how many are students, and how many are salaried employees?
Starting from the lady on your right, she is a journalist. Mayuri is also an entrepreneur, also a student. She is in transit. Deepak is a well-established entrepreneur in the field of medical tourism, and he's doing pretty well outside the country as well as here. He's based out of Chandigarh. And Deepak, is with TAI, also an aspiring entrepreneur. Ravdeep is already an entrepreneur, and he handles issues related to cybercrime and all. We have with us Vivek Sani. He's from Ernst & Young. He's Director Services. His colleague Mohan. And
Shyam, student.
Okay, then you are also a student?
Shyam, I'm a student in negotiation.
Okay, yeah. So 2 questions we got from mail, which you would like to address now is okay. What we got people asking us is that what should be the first guidelines for a startup? So if you can just highlight on that and
In fact, I thought of basing my talk on from a startup angle only, the compliance issues which a startup can face, and normally from a service industry point of view. So there are 2 taxes, like I said, I will focus on one is income tax, another is service. There is obviously VAT, but that will not be applicable to service industry, and VAT is anyways not my forte. But if anybody has any questions on VAT, I will give my email address and I can forward it to my partner who deals in that. From a startup angle, obviously, we'll talk about income tax. The first thing is that whenever you, either a company or a partnership or a LLP or your sole proprietorship, you need to have a PAN number. And in case you want to be deducting taxes, then you need a TAN number also. Another issue which would be in terms of when I said TAN would be deduction of taxes at source. So in case you are paying salaries to your employees, and then in case the employee from upfront that would be crossing the exemption limit, you have to make sure you deduct the taxes. And in terms of if you're paying any rent, any commercial establishment you're renting out, in terms of any plant or machinery also, you need to have deduction of sources. If you're paying any commission, if you're paying any interest, other than securities, then also. You need to make sure that you file your TDS returns on time, and whichever tax you collected, you pay to the government on time to basically avoid paying penalties to the government. In terms of filing of returns for any company or firm which is not to be audited, for companies obviously it's 30th September, but any other entity which accounts are not to be audited, it is 31st of July, which is just approaching. In case you don't file your returns by the end of the year, like 31st March 2030, beyond that the penalty can be leveled up to 5,000 by the income tax department. Another issue is advance taxes. You have to make sure that you pay your advance taxes. There are 4 dates for paying the advance taxes. And in case you know your tax liability for 10,000, then you have to deduct taxes in a particular percentage. In terms of service tax, the recent changes which have come for service tax is the negative list. Initially, when the service tax was brought out in 1994, there was a positive list. Every year, the government actually added a few services. Until this year, there were nearly 119 services which were under the ambit of service tax. But now they've actually moved from a positive list to a negative list, where nearly 38 services are exempt from service tax, but all other services would be under the ambit of service tax. And the present rate of service tax is nearly 12%. And if you add the cess, education cess, and secondary cess, then it's nearly 12.36%. The government actually is targeting the service sector because that is nearly 60% of the GDP of India, and nearly 97,000 crore was collected last year. They are targeting nearly more than 120,000 crores. And people are facing a lot of issues in terms of service tax compliance. There's a very important notification in the Service Tax Act that if you are a small scale service provider, till 10 lakh, you don't have to collect taxes from the service recipient. Under the Service Tax Act, the most important thing is that the service provider has to collect the tax from the service recipient and then pass on that service tax which has been collected to the government.
Is it post 10 or is it once it cross the 10 lakh mark? Or?
Yes, cross the 10 lakh. If you are aware that in a particular year you would be crossing 9 lakh, then you should register for service tax. And if you know that you will be crossing a turnover more than 10 lakh, then you should start collecting it and start paying it also to the government.
Okay, before then I should start.
Yes. So this is the broad outline of service and income tax. In terms of rate of taxation, in the present year for an individual, the exemption limit is now 2 lakhs. That is both for male and female. Earlier it was 180 and 190. In terms of tax rates for partnership, it's 30% on the total profit after you take out all the expenses, and even for company it's 30%. There is a new model, LLP in India. A lot of existing partnerships or sole proprietorships are moving to that model. LLP is a dual model. It is both a hybrid between a partnership and a company. It has advantages of a company in terms of limited liability, and it has advantages of a partnership also, where you can have your internal structure in terms of a partnership deed. Even that is taxed at 30%. And in terms of partnership, to avoid double taxation, the partnership firm would pay the tax on its profits, and the profits which are distributed among the partners, they don't have to pay any tax on it. So that is avoiding the double taxation. Otherwise, it would lead to taxation on the same income. In terms of company, the company actually pay again taxes on its profits, and the shareholders of the company, they get dividends which are distributed from the profit if the company decides to do that. Again, to avoid double taxation, the company would pay taxes on the profits, and the dividends which are distributed to the shareholders, they don't have to pay any taxes on the dividends. I mean to say, I would leave the floor open for questions. I think that would be the best thing to do, because I don't want to get into the technical issues as such. So if you have any specific questions in terms of tax issues, please.
One question is that I don't know what was the earlier discussion, but this is a little bit different from the discussion. I mean, generally what happens in SMEs is that lot of payment gets struck to some of the big companies. I mean, we do the work of some company and then they keep the payment on hold for quite a long time. So is there any rules or regulations from which the payments of SMEs are protected?
See, from an accounting point of view, obviously, you need to have a consistency. Either you are doing it on accrual basis or cash basis. So if you are maintaining on accrual basis, then whenever you have raised a bill, you have to show a turnover in that year. And and obviously your profits will be calculated on those basis and you have to pay tax on those basis. But if you are doing it on a cash basis, whenever the cash is received, obviously that will be the turnover in that particular year. If I understood your question correctly. Because you're saying that you sometimes raise the bills but you don't collect
we don't get the payment
in that particular year, you get it in the next year.
Right.
But if you are putting it on a accrual basis, obviously you will have to put those bills which you have raised in that particular year. But the best person to take care of this would be the accountant who is maintaining your accounts.
I would like to add something.
Yes,
else.
please.
There is one legislation in India which is called Micro, Small, Medium Enterprises Act. It protects the interest of SMEs in terms of there is a criteria that which enterprise would be small, which would be medium, and which would be like that based on turnover and sort of. So there is a criteria for the payment to SMEs, and if the payment is not made within that limit, there is a provision for interest also. So that interest has to be paid to that SME if you don't make the payment in time. So if I understand correctly that the tangent where you were referring to in terms of collecting the payment, then you can refer to that legislation that may be helpful to you.
That is
MSME
MSMED Act 2006.
Yes. I think besides that, there is no such regulation.
Yeah, I read about that act actually, but I am not too confident means how effective is that act.
No, it is effective. It is getting effective.
Means you personally have experienced that.
I have not practically seen it, in the sense that a person for collecting that payment, he is implementing that. But if you see from a tax perspective, also like whatever interest, government is discouraging people for delaying payment to SMEs, in the sense that whatever interest you would pay to SME, that is not allowed as a tax break while computing your income.
Okay.
So they are discouraging that you make payment to SMEs on time. And there is a specific disclosure under the Companies Act in the financial statements that these are the dues which are due to the SMEs, and this is the interest accrued on that. So government is taking seriously on that, but I don't know practically how one to get the payment. How can one take the benefit of that legislation and get the payment earlier?
Actually, we are looking after this kind of, but we are not getting any advocate so that we can contact or who will take up this matter. So this is the little bit of challenges.
But I think you can, because if that customer is your regular customer, so more your commercial terms would beneficial rather than resorting to some legal advocate.
That is the limit.
Spoil your relationship.
So the moment you will opt for that too,
No,
you will not be interested in the commercial activity anymore.
I understand, but obviously if we are thinking of that thing, so this is the limit that we can't wait after this period. This is the limit when we have to take any action when nothing is happening. So we understand that. Means if we will go for that action, we won't be doing any business after that. We understand that.
No, but just if on a gentle side, if you want to rely on that act and get the money, you can definitely take resort to that legislation and see how it can help you.
Okay.
No, I definitely agree that if you take out the legal aspect out of it, approaching an advocate, at the drop of a hat that the payments are not coming through. I think the question was basically addressed from a accounting and tax point of view, whether the income tax department would actually try and look at that and whether that act actually would be enforceable, or the income tax department would actually be under the purview of that act. So if I have got it correctly,
No,
this
this
was
was
kind
a
of
angle, yes,
persuasive thing there could be.
Yes.
Because an act is there in terms of protecting the. But there is no other provision in the income tax act where obviously they.
No, obviously not. There is no.
But yes, in case, obviously that would become a inter-party dispute if payments actually don't end up in your kitty, then obviously that could be a commercial dispute or a consumer dispute.
And you may, obviously, so the track rate could also be used.
If anybody has any questions, there is in terms of any international tax aspects, if any of you have any kind of international tax dealings, so a lot of people don't understand the international tax aspects. How does it work? If you have either operations in another country or if you are dealing with a client which is another country, or you are a company or a partnership or whatever legal entity and you are sending your employees abroad, so there could be a possibility that some income is accruing in that country. So how the international tax system works is that there is no codified law as such. But just to give you an example, if there is a company which is set up in India, let us say in Chandigarh, and you have a subsidiary in UK, then the subsidiary itself is incorporated in UK, and then it would be a tax resident in UK by way of incorporation, and it would pay UK taxes and the Indian company would pay Indian taxes. If an Indian company sets up a branch, or let us suppose a UK company sets up a branch in India, then the branch in itself is not incorporated here. Then it has to see whether the branch is making profits here. It would pay taxes on its profits here. Though the UK company itself would include in its total turnover the profits or the turnover which has been made in India. How the tax system works is that there is a double taxation treaty between most of the countries, and they decide which country would have a right to tax the profits, where the branch is, and we normally term it as a resident country and a source country. The source country would be where the branch is set up and the income is accruing. In terms of individuals, sometimes if you are an employee in India and your company sends you on some kind of project to UK and it is paying you salary in UK, then obviously your salary is accruing in UK also, and your salary is accruing and is being paid in India also. So every country has their way of determining your tax residency. Like in India, if you are here for more than 182 days or more, you are a tax resident in a particular year. UK has its own resident tax basis. So there's a lot of confusion, like people confuse citizenship with tax status. Normally there are only one or two countries in the world which taxes you on citizenship basis. If you are a US citizen, then you are taxed on your worldwide income, irrespective wherever you live. I think Singapore probably also has that, or Hong Kong.
US also has that.
US is the main country which has that. Even if you are in India, you are an Indian tax resident, you would include your worldwide income in the Indian tax return. But if you have paid taxes in any other country, you will get a credit for those taxes, or you will get an exemption for those taxes. That is called the credit and exemption basis. Every country either has an exemption system or a credit system. By credit system, I'll just explain a layman term that if you have, let us suppose, 1 lakh of income which is accrued in India, which was from Indian sources, and you had another 1 lakh which accrued to you in US, then if you are an Indian tax resident, then you would show 2 lakh as your total income. But if on those 1 lakh you've already paid 30,000 rupees as taxes, then whatever tax which you have to pay to the government, you will get credit for the 30,000. If India operates an exemption system, then that 1 lakh itself would not be included in the total income which you would put in the Indian tax return. So that is the difference between credit and exemption system in a very layman term. And normally there are cases when the double taxation treaty would come into place when you are a resident in both countries. There could be a possibility that you are a resident in both countries. Then the tax treaty comes into play, and there are certain articles which deal with, from an employee's point of view, from pension point of view, even from properties point of view. Let us suppose if you are an Indian tax resident, you are an Indian citizen, you buy a property in Dubai, and there are some capital gain issues. When you sell the property, you have to pay capital, although there are no taxes as such in Dubai. But let us suppose you have to pay capital gain. So under the articles, under the double taxation treaty articles, only the source country where the property is situated would have the right to tax that. So there are a lot of Indians who have properties all over the world. So it's not that they would, if they have paid capital gain tax in UK or property taxes in UK, they would not be liable to pay taxes on those income once again in India, because they will get a credit for those taxes. Because mostly in all the double tax treaties, in terms of property, the situs where the property is situated, that country would have the right to tax that income.
To the new, when you're starting a new venture,
There is a venture capital thing which has been introduced, but again, at this moment, I would not be able to tell you in detail about this. If you have something to add on that, you can. But if you want complete details on that, I can come back to you and talk to you in detail. But yes, there have been certain
new amendment.
yes, just to help the startups in terms of venture capital, yes, there are legislation which has come into place from this finance bill 2012.
Generally, the situation comes when entrepreneur comes into this, they want to start a venture or any company or organization or any business, whatever you call it. So what happens? They think about a name, right? So actually, this question also came to me 3 years, 4 years back. That should I go with the registration of the company right from the first day, or else I